Hi everybody, so today I'm going to talk about something that's close to my heart and personal. I'm going to talk about the IPP sentence, which is an indeterminate sentence for public protection. So I myself was handed IPP in 2006 and I was recommended to serve 4 years in prison, but the IPP sentence is actually 99 years. So that's the sentence that goes on record when you go to prison. So when I was in prison outside of my cell, when I was in Durham prison, they had your sentence on, so my sentence said 99 years. I've been out of prison, back out 40 months now after a recall, but I'm still serving this IPP and it's for life. It's similar to a life sentence. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the IPP and a bit about the facts. And so like I say, the IPP is indeterminate sentence for public protection, and it was made for the most serious violent offenders and sexual offenders. Now everyone's in between on the sentence because, like I am myself, like I don't agree with the IPPs. It should never have been brought out, but the IPP was brought out specifically for sex offenders. So I do agree with it for sex offenders because they do need to be on it because they are a danger to the public. And but the IPP was brought out in 2005 and it was only designed to be for 1,000 people, like 1,000 dangerous prisoners, people in the UK. But I'm saying UK, it was actually only brought out in England and Wales. Scotland and Ireland, IPP doesn't exist, never has. So it was brought out in 2005, and then in 2012 it was deemed inhumane. This is what was said in the Parliament, in the wherever it was. It was deemed inhumane and it was abolished. It was Lord David Blunkett that brought IPPs out. He was the one that created the IPP. And he's even given a statement and said in his interview, he regrets giving the IPP out. And he said it was, what was it he said? I've got this wrote down a few things just so I don't forget. He says he regrets it and it is a disaster. That's what he said. So IPPs, here's some statistics. There was 8,711 given out, 249 of them were given to women, 326 were given to children, and 309 of them were aged between 15 and 17, and 10 of them were girls. 16 boys aged 12 to 14. So you're giving this sort of sentence out to kids. I mean, that's ridiculous. Between the ages of 12 and 14, or even between 15 and 17, you haven't even matured then, and they're handing you with this sentence that you've got to serve, but you've also got to prove that you're a good person. Like in prison, you can't get into any sort of trouble whatsoever, or you will not be released. So how can you tell kids aged between 12 and 17 to behave themselves and not backchat? And if the screws are giving them grief, not to tell the screws to fuck off. If you tell the screw to fuck off, it gets put down as a negative comment. You get a bad report. You come up for your parole and they say that you haven't changed your ways, so you get knocked back. And this is the sentence that people are serving. 8,711. And here's some more horrible statistics. Over 250 IPPs have died. 71 IPPs, listen to this, have committed suicide. And some of them were just young as well, really young. And the reason why they committed suicide was because they couldn't handle the sentence. Like the majority of them have got mental health problems and they can't behave whilst they're in prison. And when I say behave, I mean things like what I've just said, backchatting. So 71 people have actually took their own lives. One of them was a lady. I mean, there's been loads of ladies done it, lasses, but one of them was a lass called Charlotte. She got a 15-month IPP, right? So listen to this, 15 months, you could have been out in just over a year. But 8 years later, she's still sitting in prison, rotten, because she's been diagnosed with a personality disorder. So she's telling the screws to fuck off. She's getting into bits of trouble that she doesn't realise she's getting into. She's getting bad comments, she's getting negative reports. She's never committed any more violence. There's nothing in the 8 years, she's never committed violence, but she's been, obviously her behaviour's been irrational, which anybody would who's got mental health problems, locked in a pad, sometimes 23 hours a day. She was even on an act. An act means you're on a suicide watch. She was on a suicide watch when she killed herself. The screws were meant to be going to her pad every hour and checking on her, looking through the hatch. I read the story on it, so one of the three female screws that was on the night before went in the morning and she's seen that she was still in the same position in that bed. She's managed to strangle herself whilst in bed, and the screws that have kept me looking through her flap, checking on her, just thought she was sitting in an upright position. But this one screw, who must have been a bit clued up and maybe cared a bit, opened the door and shouted, "Charlotte, are you okay? Are you okay?" No response. Went and touched her, freezing cold. She was dead. She killed herself. Now this is just a lass that's been suffering with her mental health. She's probably committed her offence while it's on the out because of her mental health, so instead of getting help, they've given her this inhumane sentence and they won't release her. She's felt helpless, so she's killed herself. But over the 8,711 that were given out, there's still 2,000 in prison that have never been released. There's over 3,000 in prison still. 3,000 people still in prison of this sentence that was abolished, deemed inhumane, and over 1,000 of them are back in on recall. So in recall to prison, the most common reason is for non-compliance. So you're out in the community like myself, on life licence, say you disagree with something, probation says, you've never committed an offence, but you don't get on with your probation, you've said something rude, or some of the conditions are like you can't stay out overnight without telling probation. So maybe one night you've been out with your friends, you didn't go home, probation's found out about it, and you get recalled. You've never committed another offence, but you're getting recalled to prison because of something like this, on this inhumane sentence. So you get recalled back into prison, and the process is you're in for a minimum of 6 months whilst they're getting everything sorted out, the paperwork, the parole board. But because there's still 3,000 prisoners in prison, the parole board just can't cope with it. So sometimes you're left in for 2 years on a recall for something, maybe it's like a daft argument or something like that. You've never committed another offence, but you've spent 2 years of your life back in prison fighting to get back out. But whilst you're in prison, again, if you have any negative comments, you get in trouble, you tell someone to fuck off, or you're fighting, someone's fighting and you get involved, but you haven't actually done anything. Again, you come up for parole, you get kept in again for another 2 years. So the process just goes on, and that's why the people that can't behave themselves whilst they're in there and never getting out. I'm going to talk about a lad from up this way, up in Newcastle, from Scotswood, Danny Weatherson. He was 17-year-old when he got his IPP. He got a 15-month IPP for attempted robbery of a phone. And the phone that he tried to rob off someone else was another kid. So he's out in the street, 17-year-old, probably he's just messing around and he's fucking threatened, tried to rob someone's phone. Obviously he's never even getting the phone, but they went to the police. He's been brought up in front of the courts and he's getting a 15-month IPP at 17-year-old. It's now 17 years later and he's still in prison. He's 34-year-old now, right? 34, he's been in prison since he was 17-year-old. How can that be justified when this sentence, they keep saying, like I mentioned a few times, it's been abolished, inhumane, but the people that are serving it have still got it and they're stuck with it. So a 15-month tariff for an attempted robbery. He's tried to kill himself on numerous occasions because he's been diagnosed with mental health problems. But again, if you go into prison 17-year-old, you've got to think of it this way. I was 20 when I went into prison as well, but when you get in prison 17-year-old, everything outside's still going on, but you're in prison and it's just Groundhog Day, and your brain is he's still 17-year-old in his head because he's never had time to mature properly, but he's in prison. He can't control his mental health. He's got feelings of anxiety, despair. Some of the screws might be winding him up and he's telling them to fuck off and he's fucking being aggressive towards them. And they're now saying he's not getting released because he's showing violent tendencies. So he keeps getting knocked back and he's I think he was cutting his cell. He's trying to, I'm sure, don't mark my words, but I'm sure he tried to cut his throat, cut himself up. So this was all because he couldn't handle the sentence. He felt like he was trapped. I know the feeling. You're trapped like an animal. You can't get out. You've got feelings of despair and anxiety. You feel like you just want to get up and run out, but you can't because you're trapped. So his way of escaping was cutting himself. So he's come up for parole again. And what happens? They've knocked him back because he's been violent on himself. So again, he's got no escape. And then they turn to drugs. They can't cope with it, so they turn to drugs. A lot of them turn to spice just to get out of their heads and forget about prison. So they come up for parole again. They've had a piss test and it comes up they've took drugs. So they get another 12 to 18 months or maybe it's 2 year knockback. So there's another 2 year because you've took drugs because you can't handle the prison. So how do you get out of this vicious cycle if you're not mentally strong? Luckily I was mentally strong and I didn't go down that route. And I bettered myself whilst I was in there and I got back out on release. But I think Danny, I'm not sure, but he might be in a Cat D now, so I wish him luck, hopefully he gets out. But there's Donna Mooney, who's I know from Facebook. She got in contact with my wife whilst I was in prison. She's campaigning against the IPPs. Her brother killed himself. He was suffering with mental health. The screws, he kept fighting with the screws, but he was, I think he was, like I say, he was suffering with his mental health and he ended up killing himself. But Donna is getting together with Shirley DeBono and they've created a group. I think it was Shirley that done the group. It's called Ungrip, because there's a lot of people campaigning against these IPPs. They've made groups up and they're getting together, uniting, and they're doing marches against the IPP. But the UNGRIP stands for United Group for Reform of IPP. But some people that are stuck in prisons on the IPPs, they have to do courses. You've got to do offender behaviour courses. I've done numerous courses myself just to say that you're rehabilitated, so they release you back into the community. But I've come across some prisoners that can't read, they can't write, they can't function, they've got dyslexia when they're trying to do these. They don't even pass the assessments to get on the courses because they're not brainy enough. The classes, putting it bluntly, they're too thick to do the courses. So what happens, they can't do the course, they come up for parole, they said you haven't done any offender behaviour courses, so we're knocking you back. But you can't do the courses because you're not intelligent enough. And there's not enough staff to do one-to-one with you, so how the fuck are you supposed to get out? Stuck in the system, left to rot. People are just killing themselves left, right and centre because they can't get out. But so, like I say, it was only brought out in England and Wales, Scotland and Ireland. Like, this is supposed to be the United Kingdom, Great Britain, but yet Scotland and Ireland didn't agree with the IPP, so they didn't bring it out in their countries. So what does that tell you? But like I say, I will be talking more about these IPPs. I'm going to delve into it more, get some more facts. I mean, most of the facts I know, but just so I'm speaking the truth facts on here, and people aren't watching and think, well, you haven't said that right, I haven't done that. But there will be a part 2 on this IPP, aka life sentence. So keep tuned, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, and then you will see future videos. But I will be keeping you updated on this IPP, this inhumane sentence. But have a good day, people. Take care.